It had been a hot day. Katie found out that even with your bathing suit and sunscreen on, it can still feel really hot. Orbie found out that even a cold drink doesn't cool you down for long when it's really hot. And Chance learned that there are just some days when it's better to sit under a bush in the shade and snooze. The phone rang and Dad answered it. When Dad covered the mouthpiece and told him that they were invited to a pool party at Tom's, Katie and Orbie in a blur whizzed up the stairs and down again, dressed and ready for swimming. As they approached Tom's house, Katie could barely hold on to Dad's hand. There was laughing and shouting and a whole lot of splashing sounds coming from the backyard. A fence went all the way around Tom's pool. As Dad opened the gate, he told Katie and Orbie the fence was keeping them all safe. It made sure that young children who didn't know how to swim or who could fall into the pool didn't get into any danger. Katie thought that was very smart of Tom's dad and mom to think of such a thing. Inside, the party was already in full swing. Andy and Miguel were already playing in the pool. Andy had on big goggles and was looking at Miguel's toes under the water as Miguel sat at the side of the pool kicking his feet. Orbie ran over to Tom right away, but Tom held up his hand for Orbie to stop. Orbie screeched to a stop, but slipped a bit on the wet poolside cement. He didn't fall, but he could have. And Tom said that water made everything slippery, so when you played at a pool, you always had to walk. Orbie showed Tom how safely he could walk, and Tom was very impressed. Katie dipped her toe in the water. It felt cool and refreshing on the hot, hot day. She went to jump in, but as she was about to lift off the side of the pool, Andy swam right in front of her. Katie waited for him to get out of the way. Tom told Katie waiting and making sure that the water was safe to jump into showed that she was a very responsible swimmer. As Katie jumped in, Miguel shouted at Andy and everybody turned. It wasn't a play shout, it was an afraid shout. Tom hurried over to see what was up, and he found that Andy had been pulling on Miguel's feet to get him into the water. Andy was only playing, but Miguel was afraid of the water. Everybody felt bad, especially Andy. Andy told Miguel he was sorry, and Miguel sniffed that it was okay. Tom said that it was very important to let people do what they felt good and safe about doing in the pool. No pushing or pulling. Orbie and Andy felt good about playing water tag and shot off after Tom. Katie sat beside Miguel and told him that she had been afraid when she first started swimming. Miguel, who was feeling really silly for being afraid, looked at Katie and right away felt a whole lot better. Katie told Miguel that the shallow end was fun and not at all deep. She climbed in and showed him. She told him he could sit on the big cement steps and feel very safe. Miguel wasn't sure, but he wanted to try. So he sat down on the first step carefully and looked at Katie. The step was barely in the water, and Katie was right. He felt very safe. Then Katie showed him how she'd learned to swim underwater. Miguel slipped down to the next step. Now the water came up to his armpits. Katie was very surprised to see him there when she came up from under the water. Miguel grinned proudly. Tom announced that a terrible monster had now entered the pool, and nobody's toes were safe. There was a shriek and a giggle. Everybody really wanted the toe monster to try to get their toes, so they all swam around the pool. There was laughing and splashing, and the monster never seemed to really get anyone's toes. It was during this time that Katie looked over at Miguel. He was now standing on the bottom of the pool. He was noticing how his blow-up floaties were holding him up. As the tow monster swam by to tickle his toes, Miguel lifted them up and was shocked to find that his floaties held him up in the water. Once Miguel figured that out, he was off. He was the one that managed to tickle the tow monster, and he was the one who rode the monster all the way to the end of the pool. All his friends clapped their hands, and I think the most surprised person there was Miguel. Soon it was time for the barbecue. Orbie wondered if they could just eat in the pool. Tom told him that eating and swimming were two different things and needed to be done separately. When lunch was ready, everybody wrapped up in towels and sat themselves around the picnic table. Orbie had been in the water so long, his little pink spots had turned blue. While they were eating lunch, Miguel, who finished early, headed back to perfect his swimming. Tom asked Miguel to wait a few minutes for his food to go down into his body. Then he explained another very important swimming rule. Never swim alone. Miguel didn't really know why. He was going to stay in the shallow end. Tom told him it didn't have anything to do with how deep the water was. If no one was there to watch you and you got into trouble, no one would know. If someone was there, they could throw a life preserver, or give you a hand, or call someone else to help. Well, the pool party was a great success. And all the friends swam until their fingers wrinkled and their lips turned purple. Tom invited them all back to swim another day, and everybody said, hooray! It had been the best hot day any of them could remember. And I hope that if you're at a pool, that you'll remember some of Tom's rules. They'll help keep you safe. And that's important, because you're very, very special to me.
Did you know? Many years ago, when television was a brand new invention, the pictures were only in black and white, like this. A few years later, color television was invented. Imagine only being able to see a rainbow in black and white.